A History of Southern Missouri and Northern Arkansas by William Monks, published in 1907. Skirmishes with the Rebels, number 37. Sometime in the summer, Colonel Freeman, who was commanding the rebels in northeastern Arkansas, whose headquarters were near the Spring River Mill, made a raid and threatened to capture the Federal forces that were then at the Licking Post. I soon gained information of his intention, made every preparation to repel the attack, also informed the commander at Rolla of the intended raid. Colonel Freeman, accompanied by other rebel commanders, concentrated all of the available rebel force then at his command, raided the country, came within about 5 miles of the post, learned that reinforcements had been sent to the post, countermarched, and retreated to his headquarters near the head of Spring River. A regiment of Federal troops known as the 15th Veterans was sent as a reinforcement with a part of the 5th Missouri State Militia that was then stationed at Salem, with orders to remain at the post. I received orders to organize all of the available troops and pursue the rebel forces, and, if possible, to reach the Spring River Mill in Fulton County, Arkansas, and destroy the mill, which Freeman was using at that time for grinding meal. The Federal force, composing the scout, aggregating about 350 men, moved from the post at Licking. The author divided his forces, ordering one wing of them to move through Spring Valley in Texas County, the other wing to move directly in the direction of Thomasville, with orders to form a junction about 7 miles from Thomasville, where there was a rebel force stationed. On reaching the Wallace Farm in Oregon County, we came on to a force of rebels commanded by James Jameson, who had met for the purpose of receiving ammunition which had been smuggled through from Ironton. After an engagement, the rebels fled, leaving one man dead. James Jameson received a flesh wound in the thigh. The Federal force, which had been ordered through Spring Valley, had had an engagement near the head of the valley, which had delayed them. The plans of the author had been frustrated by coming in contact with the rebels sooner than he expected. As they had retreated in the direction of Thomasville, where the main force was said to be stationed, I continued my march and in about 1 mile came on to a rebel camp, where the rebels had cabins erected for quarters. Here another spirited engagement took place, the rebels retreating in the direction of Thomasville, the Federal forces still pursuing. Just above Thomasville, the command encountered a strong picket force, fired upon the command, intending to halt it, but being satisfied that there was a trap laid, I ordered a charge. The picket force retreated to the left up a steep hill, and at once the whole rebel force opened fire from the side of the mountain. The bullets flew just above our heads like hail, one ball passing through my hat. We still continued the charge, and on reaching the top of the hill, routed the whole rebel force, and they again retreated. The author marched into Thomasville, selected his camping ground inside of Captain Old's barn lot, giving us the advantage of the barn in case we were attacked by a superior rebel force. I at once dispatched a forage train with strong escort to gather in all the forage possible, as it was very scarce in the country. After we had been in camp about an hour, I inquired of Captain Olds if he knew of any corn. He said he did not. In about a half hour, my attention was called by one of the captains pointing to a large smokehouse, and on looking, saw the soldiers taking down any amount of first-class corn. I informed the captain that Captain Olds had claimed that he had no corn, to take the quartermaster and let him place a guard over the corn to see that it was not wasted, and that it was properly apportioned. In a short time, the author saw Captain Olds coming. He went to one of the other captains and inquired who the commander was. He was informed that it was Captain Monks. He came to the author laughing and remarked, "You found my corn, did you? I told you that I had none. I had to secrete it in that building to keep it so that the rebels could not find it." I just remarked to Captain Olds, "You needn't try to hide anything from these lop-eared Dutch, for I don't care where you put it. They will find it." The men who discovered the corn were all Germans and belonged to a German company. He asked us to feed just as sparingly as possible and leave him a part of the corn, which we did. He then attempted to warn the author of his danger and asked him if he intended to camp there for the night. Said that Colonel Freeman had over 1,000 men which he could concentrate within 5 or 6 hours, and that he would cut the author's command all to pieces. The author replied to the captain that that was his business, that Freeman had come up on the scout and claimed that he was wanting to fight. The author prepared for him and expected to accommodate him, but he changed his notion and retreated, devastating the country as he went. And now the author was hunting him and his forces and wanted to fight. If he came up that night and attacked the author's command, that it would save any more trouble hunting him. Just about that time, the author saw the other part of the command approaching and called the attention of Captain Olds and asked him if he thought that was a part of Freeman's command. After looking a few minutes, he said to the author, "They are Federal troops." I asked him if he thought we would be able to remain there until morning. He said that he thought we would and invited me to come into his house and eat supper. While at supper, asked if we intended to march any further south. The author informed him that if his information was correct in regard to Freeman's forces, we were about as far away from home as we ought to get, and that we had better move back in the direction of the post. The author ordered the command to be ready to march by early daylight next morning, broke camp, and moved in the direction of Spring River. On reaching the head of Warm Fork of Spring River, we encountered another rebel force, had a short engagement, and they again retreated. On reaching the head of Spring River, about the middle of the afternoon, we again met a rebel force. After considerable firing, they retreated. The author moved up near the mill and went into camp. The mill was grinding corn with quite a lot of corn on hand, but the miller left and retreated with the rebels. The author soon placed a substitute in his place, and the boys had a fine time baking corn cakes. After supper, some of the men had just retired to rest, when the rebels again made a fierce attack. After fighting for 20 or 25 minutes, they retreated a short distance and went into camp, the river dividing the two forces. During the night, the two pickets would dare each other to cross the river. During the night, there came a heavy rain and made the Warm Fork of Spring River swimming. There was no way to cross except on the mill dam. The next morning, about daylight, the author ordered them to take the millstones and break them up and destroy the machinery so it would be impossible to grind. Dismounted about 100 men, placed them in hiding, and marched away a short distance, thinking the rebels would cross over and we would surprise and capture them. But on seeing the Federals break camp and marching up on the west side of the river, they broke camp and marched up on the east side of the river. The author then mounted his men and marched up the Warm Fork to where he effected a crossing, marched about 10 miles, went into camp for the purpose of getting breakfast. Just after breakfast, the author noticed the advance of a rebel force march out on another road. As soon as they discovered that the Federals were in camp, they fell back, and the author at once mounted his men. On the other road, as there was a considerable hill that hid them from sight, he formed his men in 2 lines in a V, detailed a strong advance force, ordered them to move on to the rebels and charge them, and in case they found that they were too strong, to retreat back between the lines for the purpose of drawing the rebel forces in between the lines. After a fierce conflict lasting but a few minutes, the rebels again retreated, leaving a rebel major dead upon the ground. We then marched into Thomasville and had another running fight with the rebels, went into camp, and the next morning marched back in the direction of the post at Licking, reaching the post about 10 o'clock that night. The author again took command at the post, and the 15th Veterans returned to Rolla.